This video is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Learn more at expressvpn.com/wisecrack. What's up, Wisecrack? Jared here. Today we're exploring the film that beats out Doogie Howser MD for best Neil Patrick Harris appearance pre-Barney Stinson.
You don't approve? Well, too bad.
Paul Verhoeven's sci-fi cult classic, Starship Troopers. Based on the Robert Heinlein novel of the same name, Starship Troopers is weird, even for a movie about recent high school graduates fighting giant space bugs with big ol' machine guns. Critics, scholars, and even fans have had a tough time putting a neat label on it. When it first came out, audiences mostly took it at face value as a cheesy but enjoyable space romp. Since then, scholars have pointed out that the film offers a heaping helping of fascist imagery and ideology. While many critics bemoan the fact that the film's satire of militarism and fascism, obvious to them, was lost on the majority of initial viewers, others argue that a straightforward interpretation isn't necessarily wrong, that at least in some respects, the movie can be viewed as earnestly pro-fascist. And the debate continues, for good reason. This movie is tough to pin down. While at times Verhoeven appears to be poking fun at the character's gung-ho attitudes towards violence and authority, at other points, the movie reads like a straightforward military flick, even a propaganda piece. What Starship Troopers actually accomplishes is something far more subtle and potentially disturbing. So today we're going to explore what makes Starship Troopers one of the most surprisingly complex takes on fascism in cinema. Welcome to this Wisecrack Edition on Starship Troopers, sexy fascism. As always, spoilers for a sun-bleached VHS tape you passed 100 times on Blockbuster and always thought about renting but never quite got around to it before they went under, ahead. But first, a quick recap. In the near future, the world is run by the United Citizen Federation, which grants full citizenship and voting rights only to those who volunteer for military service.
I'm doing my part too.
People who don't serve remain civilians. Fresh out of high school, varsity athlete Johnny Rico defies his well-to-do parents and enlists in federal service to earn citizenship, and to follow his sweetheart Carmen Ibanez, who dreams of being a Federation pilot. While his psychic friend Carl Jenkins tests into military intelligence, Johnny winds up in mobile infantry with Dizzy Flores, a former teammate who's had a crush on him for years. When an asteroid from the distant planet of Clendathu destroys Johnny's hometown of Buenos Aires, he enthusiastically takes part in the resulting war of extermination against the planet's bug-like inhabitants, the Arachnids. Growing into his new identity as a soldier citizen of the Federation, Johnny blasts his way through battle after battle and, with his surviving friends, winds up a high-ranking leader in the war effort. Starship Troopers is packed with references to the fascist ideologies of the 20th century. Now, on a superficial level, the film draws connections between these political movements and the United Citizen Federation with blatant visual cues. The Federation emblem, for instance, bears resemblance to the Nazi Reichsadler, while the dress uniforms of the mobile infantry, fleet, and in particular Games and Theory call to mind those worn by the various branches of the Wehrmacht. Never thought you'd see Neil Patrick Harris dressed as an SS officer, did you?
I hope you're ready for more.
On a deeper level, the ideology espoused by authority figures within the Federation shares key components with basic fascist political philosophy. If you listen closely, you'll notice that Johnny's mentors tend to be social Darwinists. They love to reduce the war between Earth and Clendathu to a competition between species, with the fitter race and society destined to control the galaxy. As his biology teacher puts it,
"This archaic sand beetle is superior in many ways. It reproduces in vast numbers, has no ego, has no fear, doesn't know about death, and so is the perfect selfless member of society."
By the way, that's Blanche Devereaux bemoaning the shortcomings of our species for all you Golden Girl fans out there. Just me? Whatever. Even Lieutenant Ratchak's battle cry brings it all back to survival of the fittest.
Come on, you hate! You want to live forever?
Of course, at the core of the Federation ideology is the belief that the right to exercise political power is not given at birth, but earned through the willingness and ability to inflict violence onto others.
Something given has no value. Look, when you vote, you are exercising political authority. You're using force. And force, my friends, is violence, the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived.
German fascists, inspired by the pro-military writings of World War I veterans such as Ernst Jünger, held a similar view. Younger's Storm of Steel, a memoir about his formative experiences as a soldier during World War I, was one text in a massive wave of German literature from the time that valorized veterans above all other members of society, and portrayed war as a kick-ass way to develop as a man, have fun adventures, and experience friendship and camaraderie. In these books, the Western Front became less a waterlogged, rat-infested hellhole that ground up soldiers by the thousands in a vain attempt to further nationalist agendas, and more of a slick startup that buys you lunch and promises you hard, but meaningful work. In his analysis of Starship Troopers, historian Brian E. Krim points out that these novels emphasize the transformative experience of war and the inherent right of veterans to lead. Younger's personal odyssey mirrors Johnny Rico's journey from a clueless teenager to the new man the fascist movement revered. The fascist new man, the physically capable and emotionally hard human that Hitler, Mussolini, and other fascists hope to make the new societal norm, is able to deal out violence on behalf of the state without feelings of guilt or remorse. Johnny and his friends either demonstrate this ability from the outset,
oh, come on, it's just a bug,
or develop it through their exposure to war. What's more, the Federation motivates its population to take part in the war by abandoning logic and appealing to passions and emotions, and in particular, a very specific variety of hatred. In other words, by taking a fascist approach to political persuasion. As historian Alexander de Grand notes, at its core, fascism is an appreciation of the irrational forces in modern society and a glorification of instinct and violence in political life. And such anti-intellectualism is a prominent part of the Federation mindset. When Mr. Rico insists that Johnny go to college rather than volunteer for military service, the film frames him as a fool worthy of his son's scorn, a coward standing in the way of his chance to serve.
You're going to Harvard, and that's the end of it.
Likewise, when any debate around the war effort is brought up, it's immediately shut down by sloganeering and emotional appeals.
Some say the bugs were provoked by the intrusion of humans into their natural habitat, that a live and let live policy is preferable to war with the bugs.
Let me tell you something. I'm from Buenos Aires, and I say kill them all!
The only acceptable form of intelligence is functional intelligence applied in service of the state. For instance, Carmen's navigational abilities or Carl's studies of arachnid biology and behavior.
Here's a tip. Aim for the nerve stem and put it down for good.
Moreover, Federation propaganda describing the arachnids,
frankly, I find the idea of a bug that thinks offensive.
And these soldiers' attitudes towards them are similar to Nazi depictions of Jews circa World War II, designed as they were to bypass reason and stoke feelings of hatred in the viewer.
The only good bug is a dead bug.
In his essay, The Anti-Semite and the Jew, philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre contends that true anti-Semitism involves more than simple hatred towards Jewish people. According to him, the defining characteristic of the anti-Semite is that he loves his hatred. As Sartre puts it, it's not unusual for people to elect to live a life of passion rather than of reason. But ordinarily, they love the objects of passion: women, glory, power, money. Since the anti-Semite has chosen hate, we're forced to conclude that it is the state of passion that he loves. The Federation cultivates this same complex emotional response within its own population, while the film does the same thing with its audience. The fact that the arachnids resemble something as inhuman and universally disliked as Earth insects makes the impulse to hate them, and in the process identify with the fascist cause, that much more appealing. Federation soldiers, or anti-arachnites if you will, willingly forgo the typical objects of passion so they can spend more time doing what they love best: hating bugs. Following the debacle on Clendathu, Sky Marshal Deans voluntarily resigns his post as leader of the Federation so that a more effective general, a better bug killer, can take his place. More to the point, when Sergeant Zim is told that he'll have to forfeit his rank in order to fight the bugs directly,
I want combat, sir.
The only way you're gonna see combat is if you bust yourself to private. Get me?
he goes ahead and does it, stripping himself of authority so that he can kill bugs face to face.
Good job, Sergeant.
Thank you, sir. That would be private, sir.
And when you get right down to it, the soldiers and mobile infantry don't seem all that broken up about Buenos Aires. If anything, they come across as weirdly happy to be in the middle of a war zone. Sartre would tell you that they are less angry at the bugs and more eager for the chance to indulge their hatred by exercising violence, even hungry for it.
Here's a bunch of MI kids that look like they could eat bugs for lunch.
Yum, yum, yum.
So, Starship Troopers serves up fascism in a science fiction context. That in itself isn't unique. You can find militaristic and/or fascist ideologies and iconography in a lot of sci-fi societies. The Klingons in Star Trek, the First Order in Star Wars, and more recently the actual Nazis in The Man in the High Castle. What makes Starship Troopers unique is that it presents members of a fascist military force as the good guys. Verhoeven does this for a specific reason. As he himself stated in an interview, "I tried to seduce the audience into joining Starship Troopers society, but then ask, what are you really joining up for?" In other words, Starship Troopers is more than just a straight-up action flick and more than just a typical spoof. It's an attempt to make us think and feel like fascists, and to make us think very hard about how we were seduced into that mindset. And seduced really is the operative word here. One of the ways Verhoeven draws us in is by figuratively and literally sexing things up. In other words, the romantic drama that plays out between Johnny, Carmen, Dizzy, and the douche to end all douches, Xander,
All is fair in love and war.
is more than just a plot device. As an audience, we become invested in this story for the same reason audiences got invested in teen dramas like 90210 and Melrose Place. We want to see what the beautiful people are gonna do next. From the moment Dizzy officially establishes her interest in Johnny,
How come we never got together?
we feel the need to keep watching to find out when the two of them are gonna finally hook up. We want love to win the day. But, and here's the brilliant part, by rooting for Johnny and Dizzy to get together, we find ourselves rooting against the Arachnids because they threaten the consummation of that sweet, sweet teenage horniness. We may even join the main character in hating the bugs because we can't bear the thought of these pretty humans not getting their rocks off together.
Make it 20 minutes.
Now, even without the propagandistic boning, Verhoeven presents the Federation as something you might actually want to be a part of. This society appears to have achieved racial and gender equality. There's no visible poverty, and medicine is advanced to the point where life-threatening injuries can be repaired in a few days.
You're dead!
Killed in action! 3 more days!
Seriously, best VA hospital in this or any other galaxy. A la Ernst Jünger, the film also offers universal human wants as part of the fascist package. Join the Federation, we're told, and you'll have fulfillment, adventure, and friends for life.
Let's make a vow. No matter what, we'll always be friends.
You know, whenever the three of us are together, I feel like things might just work out.
Hell, the UCF even appears to allow free speech, up to and including open dissent among the civilian population.
There should be a law against using a school as a recruiting station.
Hardly what you would expect from a fascist dictatorship. With all these shiny things to look at, it becomes pretty easy to forget that this whole enterprise is founded on an ideology we'd like to think ourselves immune to.
Naked force has resolved more issues throughout history than any other factor.
By itself, all that might be enough to get an audience unwittingly cheering on the march of an expansionist fascist regime. But Verhoeven has one more trick up his sleeve that really cements the audience's commitment. Starship Troopers borrows heavily from the work of Leni Riefenstahl and Frank Capra, the World War II filmmakers responsible for the propaganda films Triumph of the Will and Why We Fight, both of which are visually referenced in the newsreels that pop up throughout the movie. By mimicking Riefenstahl and Capra's techniques, the film also accomplishes what those original propaganda pieces were designed to achieve, something philosopher Paul Virilio referred to as cinematic derealization. This refers to making an audience immune to the horrors of war by turning it into entertainment. He claims that when filmmakers used their craft to make attacks unreal, industrial warfare ceased to be that huge funeral apparatus denounced by moralists and eventually became the greatest mystification of all, an apparatus of deception. For some more recent examples, we can look to the Gulf War and the 2003 invasion of Iraq, both of which were covered in near real time by major news outlets, much like the Federation invasion of Clondathu. Like many war movies, Starship Troopers accomplishes derealization through exaggeration. Everything from machine guns to body counts is inflated, made so absurdly big and over the top that it's difficult to grasp as real. This disconnect between the reality of the death caused by war and the story we're told is what allows the film to act as an apparatus of deception. It numbs us, piling the bodies so high that we can't truly process what's happening or understand it as a threat. Any understanding of the real cost of war is overwhelmed by the cartoonishness of the presentation. Scholar Mark Rosenthal argues that Starship Troopers refuses to be made to mean. That is, it cannot definitively be classified as either a satire or not a satire. Therefore, it can't really be used to either shore up or cut down fascism. The movie just is. Whenever you think Verhoeven is finally going to take a clear stance, the film undercuts itself. For instance, as the film ramps up toward the Battle of Clondathu, we might start to think we're watching a straightforward pro-military action flick. But that doesn't jibe with the way the failed invasion is filmed. The triumphant score cuts out.
Ace, what are we doing?
I don't know. I don't know.
Kill them! Kill them all!
And the film's usual derealization of conflict gives way to a temporary hyper-realization, as we see individual humans we've come to care about torn to pieces and dragged screaming away from their friends. And just when you think you're feeling as little sympathy for the bugs as you can, the film starts showing close-ups of their faces which have disturbingly human eyes. The brain bug in particular appears designed to make you feel both disgust and pity at the same time. While the slimy skin and brain straw are pretty dang repulsive, the brain bug also has a very expressive set of eyes, along with a massive round forehead and a soft chubby body, which are physical traits that we perhaps subconsciously associate with children. By the end of the movie, we aren't really sure what to think, and that's exactly the point. Like the best propaganda, Starship Troopers is designed to bypass rationality and make you feel something. And feel we do. We get caught up in the romance, the action, and the adventure, all without fully stopping to analyze what it is we're doing when we align ourselves with people who, by their own admission, fully intend to carry out a genocide.
It's afraid. It's afraid!
The film doesn't push us in any particular way. Instead, it seduces us with the repeated question,
would you like to know more? Would you like to know more? Would you like to know more?
If Verhoeven's done his job, the answer is
yes, sir!
But before you go, if you value your security and secrecy on the internet, then I really recommend this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN. We've been using ExpressVPN at the office, and I even got it for my own apartment. If you don't know, a VPN is a virtual private network. It allows you to surf the web safely and privately by routing your connection through a server and hiding your online actions. With a VPN, you can view videos that may be blocked in your country or have peace of mind when using your information online. They even have an app for your phone so you can safely log in to public Wi-Fi hotspots. Knowing that I'm secure from all the shady stuff going down on the internet is just one less thing I have to worry about, and I am all about making life less stressful. Right now, you can get ExpressVPN for less than $7 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Take back your internet privacy today and find out how you can get 3 months free by going to expressvpn.com/wisecrack or clicking the link in the description. That's expressvpn.com/wisecrack for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.